My parents chose my ex-husband in the divorce. Now they need my spare bedroom. I almost died when I picked up my ringing phone and heard, "Heather, sweetie, it's Mom," on the other line. I hadn't heard that voice in 6 years, not since she stood in my living room and told me I was throwing away a perfectly good man over drama while my rib was cracked and wrapped under my shirt. I didn't say anything for a solid 5 seconds because my brain was trying to process why this woman who picked my abuser over her own daughter was calling me sweetie, as if we'd just spoken last week. She kept talking because my mother has never been comfortable with silence, filling the air with, "I know it's been a while," and "Your father and I have been meaning to reach out," and I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, 6 years is definitely a while. That's one way to describe abandoning your child when she needed you most. I finally found my voice and it came out flat and hard, nothing resembling the daughter who used to cry begging them to believe her. "What do you want?" I asked, and she made this little wounded sound like I'd slapped her through the phone, completely ignoring the fact that she hadn't bothered to check if I was alive or dead since the divorce was finalized. "We're in a bit of a situation," she said, and I could hear my dad mumbling in the background, probably coaching her on what to say because that man has never had an original thought in his life, just opinions he borrowed from whoever seemed most confident at the time. "The house is gone, Heather. The bank took it. We've been staying in motels, but the money is running out and we just need somewhere to stay for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." She could have been asking for a cup of sugar with that tone, a perfectly casual request to the daughter she threw away. I laughed because she had said something so absurd, and my body genuinely didn't know how else to respond. "You're joking," I said, but I already knew she wasn't, because my mother doesn't have a sense of humor. Never has. The woman thinks knock-knock jokes are the height of comedy. "We're family," she said, and that word landed heavy in my chest because family. Really? That's what we're calling this now? Family is what you have when people show up for you, when they believe you, when they don't look at their daughter's tear-streaked face and choose her abuser because he brought good wine to Thanksgiving once and always remembered to compliment her pot roast. "No," I said, and it came out so easy, easier than I thought it would. 6 years ago, I couldn't say no to anything, couldn't stand up for myself, couldn't even leave my ex-husband Conrad without apologizing for inconveniencing everyone with my trauma. But I'd spent 6 years in therapy learning that no is a complete sentence, that I don't owe explanations to people who never cared enough to ask questions. The silence on the other end was deafening, and I could practically see my mom's face, that pinched expression she gets when things don't go her way, lips pressed together so tight they almost disappear. "Excuse me?" she finally said, and there it was, the tone I grew up fearing, the one that meant I'd disappointed her, the one that used to make me scramble to fix whatever I'd done wrong just to make that voice go away. I said no. "You can't stay with me." My dad grabbed the phone then because I heard the fumbling and then his voice, deeper and more demanding, the voice of a man who's never been told no by a woman in his life. "Now listen here, Heather. I don't know what kind of grudge you're holding on to, but your mother and I are in real trouble. We're your parents. You don't just turn your back on family when they need you." The audacity of this man, honestly, the sheer audacity of standing there and lecturing me about turning my back on family when he looked me in the eyes and told me Conrad was a stand-up guy, and I was probably exaggerating because marriages take work, and every couple has problems. I remember exactly where I was standing when he said that, in their kitchen with my hands shaking so bad I had to put down my coffee cup, and he just kept eating his toast, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd just sided with the man who made me afraid to exist in my own home. "You turned your back on me first," I said, and my voice didn't shake, didn't crack, didn't give them anything to use against me. "You chose Conrad. You believed him over me. You watched me lose everything and you didn't care. So no, you don't get to come back now that you need something and pretend we're family." My mom was crying now. I could hear it. Those theatrical sobs she's so good at producing on command, the ones that used to make me feel guilty for having feelings of my own. "We made a mistake," she wailed. "We know that now. We're sorry. Please, Heather. We have nowhere else to go." And for just a second, just one tiny second, I felt something that might have been sympathy, or might have been the ghost of the daughter I used to be, the one who would have said yes just to make the crying stop. But then I remembered what it felt like to be completely alone, to rebuild my entire life from nothing while they hosted Conrad at Christmas dinner, and that feeling died as fast as it came. "That sounds like a you problem," I said. "Don't call this number again." I hung up before they could respond, and sat there in the silence of my apartment, the apartment I pay for with my own money, the life I built from the ashes of the one they helped burn down. My hands were steady, my heart was calm, and I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't over. So my parents want to waltz back into my life after everything they put me through. They think I'm still the same girl who took their abuse quietly, but I've spent years learning how to protect myself and I'm not backing down this time. They want to guilt trip me? Fine. Let them try. Every call they make, every text they send, I'm saving. When they realize I'm not the pushover they remember, it's going to hit them hard. I can't wait to see their faces when they figure it out. I'll keep you posted. I was right. It wasn't over. I'd barely finished my morning coffee the next day when my phone started ringing again, and it didn't stop for the next 3 weeks. My parents have never understood the concept of boundaries, Probably because they've never had to respect anyone else's in their entire lives. So of course they interpreted, "Don't call this number again," as "please blow up my phone at all hours until I cave." The first few days were just calls. Mom in the morning with her soft, wounded voice, Dad in the evening with his stern, disappointed tone, both of them leaving voicemails that ranged from guilt trips to barely concealed threats about what kind of daughter abandons her own parents in their time of need. I listened to exactly one of those voicemails, heard my mom say, "I don't know where we went wrong with you," and deleted every single one after that without pressing play. When the calls didn't work, the texts started. My mom has apparently discovered emojis in her old age because suddenly my phone was lighting up with messages full of crying faces and broken hearts and praying hands, accompanied by paragraphs about how she can't sleep at night knowing her daughter hates her. She actually used the word hates, which is rich coming from a woman who watched me fall apart and chose to believe the man breaking me instead. "We're running out of money," one text said. "The motel is making us pay by the week now," said another. "Your father's back is hurting from these cheap mattresses," as if I was supposed to feel sorry for them when I spent the first year after my divorce sleeping on a futon I found on the side of the road because I couldn't afford anything else. I didn't respond to any of them. Not a single one. I just watched my phone light up and kept living my life because I'd learned a long time ago that engaging only gives them ammunition. Then came the family members. My Aunt Dixie called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and I picked up because I actually like Dixie. Or I did until she opened her mouth and said, "Heather, honey, I just got off the phone with your mother and she is absolutely beside herself." I should have known. I should have known the second I saw her name on my screen that this wasn't a social call, that my parents had started recruiting reinforcements because their own attacks weren't landing. "She says you won't let them stay with you," Dixie continued, her voice dripping with that fake concern that runs in my family. "And I just can't understand why you'd be so cruel to your own parents when they're going through such a hard time." I had to take a deep breath before I responded because the old Heather would have crumbled, would have started explaining and justifying and apologizing for having the audacity to protect herself. But I'm not the old Heather anymore. "Did she tell you why we haven't spoken in 6 years?" I asked, and the silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Did she tell you about Conrad? About what he did to me? About how she and Dad chose him over their own daughter?" More silence. Then Dixie, sounding uncomfortable now, said, "Well, she mentioned there was some disagreement about your marriage, but I'm sure if you all just sat down and talked it through." I hung up on her too. After that, it was my cousin, then my uncle, then my grandmother's sister, who I haven't seen since I was 12, and who somehow got my number just to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Every single one of them had the same script. "Your parents are struggling. Family helps family. You need to let go of the past. Holding grudges is unhealthy." Not one of them asked me what actually happened. Not one of them wanted to hear my side. They just called to deliver my parents' message wrapped in the thin disguise of concern, and I stopped answering my phone altogether unless the number was already in my contacts. My parents had turned my entire extended family into their personal army, and every single soldier was armed with guilt and absolutely zero context. 2 weeks into this harassment campaign, I came home from work to find my mom sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, her hair grayer and her clothes wrinkled in a way that the mother I grew up with never would have allowed. For half a second, I felt something twist in my chest, some leftover reflex from childhood that wanted to run to her and fix whatever was wrong. Then she opened her mouth and said, "I knew you'd have to come home eventually," with this little triumphant smile, and whatever sympathy I'd felt evaporated instantly. "You need to leave," I said, and she stood up slowly, brushing off her pants like she had all the time in the world. "I just want to talk," she said, face to face, mother to daughter. "You owe me that much." I actually stopped walking and turned to look at her because the audacity of that statement deserved acknowledgement. "I don't owe you anything," I said, and my voice was steady even though my heart was pounding. "You lost the right to demand things from me when you chose Conrad over me, when you told me I was being dramatic, when you watched me lose everything and didn't lift a finger to help." Her face crumpled into that wounded expression she's perfected over 60-something years of getting her way, but I walked past her and into my building without looking back. She came back the next day, and the day after that, sometimes with my dad, sometimes alone, always with the same script about family and forgiveness and how they've changed. My dad tried the stern approach, standing outside my building with his arms crossed like he was waiting for a teenager who'd missed curfew. "This is ridiculous, Heather," he called out when he saw me walking up the street. "We're your parents. We raised you. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us?" I walked right past him without making eye contact, and he grabbed my arm, actually grabbed my arm to stop me, and I spun around so fast he let go like I'd burned him. "Touch me again and I'm calling the police," I said, and my voice didn't sound like my voice anymore. It sounded like someone who'd survived something and wasn't going to let anyone put her through it again. He stood there sputtering about respect and gratitude while I went inside and locked the door behind me. Then they found out where I worked. I still don't know how. Maybe one of the family members they'd recruited. Maybe they'd followed me one morning. But I walked into the office on a Thursday to find my mother in the lobby, chatting up the receptionist like they were old friends. "There she is," my mom said when she saw me, loud enough for everyone in a 30-foot radius to hear. "My beautiful daughter. I was just telling Sandy here how proud I am of everything you've accomplished." I could feel every eye in the lobby on me as I walked over, my face burning with a combination of rage and humiliation. "You need to leave," I said quietly, and my mom's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went hard. "I just wanted to see where you work," she said, still loud, still performing for the audience. Is that so wrong? A mother wanting to be part of her daughter's life? I leaned in close so only she could hear me. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling security and having you escorted out, and then I'm getting a restraining order." The smile finally dropped. She looked at me with something that might have been shock, or might have been the first glimmer of understanding that I wasn't bluffing. Then she gathered her purse and walked out without another word, leaving me standing in my own lobby feeling like I'd just fought a battle that everyone around me didn't even know was happening. My hands were shaking when I got to my desk, but I didn't cry. I was done crying over people who didn't deserve my tears. I know what you're probably thinking. What could possibly be so bad that I'd let my own parents end up homeless rather than help them? What did Conrad actually do? And why can't I just forgive them and move on like everyone keeps telling me to? Trust me, I get it. From the outside, this probably looks cold. But you don't know what I went through. You don't know what they watched happen and chose to ignore. So let me tell you about my marriage. I met Conrad at my best friend's wedding. He was one of the groomsmen, tall and confident with this smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he looked at you. I was 24 and had just started my first real job after college, feeling like an adult for the first time in my life. And here was this man in a perfectly fitted suit who kept finding excuses to talk to me during the reception. "You look like you're planning your escape," he said, appearing next to me while I was hiding by the dessert table trying to avoid my friend's handsy uncle. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, and he laughed and said, "Only to someone who's also looking for the exit. I'm Conrad." He asked me to dance during a slow song, and when I stepped on his feet twice because I've never been graceful, he just laughed and said, "Good thing I wore my sturdy shoes." By the end of the night, he had my number, and I had this fluttery feeling in my chest that I mistook for the beginning of a love story. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. All the red flags I painted green because I wanted so badly to believe that someone like him could want someone like me. The first 6 months were a dream. Conrad was attentive in a way no one had ever been before, texting me good morning every day, surprising me with flowers at work, remembering every little detail I mentioned and bringing it up later to show he'd been listening. When I told him I loved this obscure band from the 90s, he tracked down concert tickets for their reunion tour 3 states away and drove us there himself. When I mentioned missing my grandmother's cooking, he found her old recipe for apple pie in a box my mom had and made it for me from scratch, flour all over his kitchen, and this proud grin on his face when it actually turned out edible. "I can't believe you did this," I said, and he kissed my forehead and said, "I'd do anything to make you happy." He met my parents within the first 2 months and charmed them completely, bringing my mom flowers and talking to my dad about football for an hour like they'd known each other for years. "He's a keeper," my mom said after that first dinner, squeezing my hand with tears in her eyes like I'd finally done something right. My dad clapped Conrad on the shoulder and said, "You take care of my little girl." And Conrad looked him right in the eyes and said, "I promise you, sir, I will treat her like a queen." Everyone loved him. My friends loved him. My coworkers loved him. I loved him so much it scared me sometimes. This overwhelming feeling that I'd somehow won the lottery and was just waiting for someone to realize they'd made a mistake. The first time something felt off was about 8 months in. We were at a restaurant and I laughed at something the waiter said. Just a dumb joke about the daily special. Nothing flirtatious, nothing inappropriate. When the waiter walked away, Conrad got quiet. That kind of quiet that fills up the whole room, and he didn't speak to me for the rest of dinner. In the car on the way home, he finally said, "You really enjoyed that, didn't you?" I looked at him confused and said, "Enjoyed what?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Don't play dumb with me, Heather." The waiter. The way you laughed at his stupid joke. The way you lit up when he was talking to you. I tried to explain that I was just being polite, that it meant nothing, that I only had eyes for him. "I didn't mean anything by it," I said. "He was just being friendly." Conrad shook his head slowly. "You have no idea how you come across, do you? How desperate you look throwing yourself at any man who gives you attention." I felt tears prick my eyes and said, "That's not fair. I wasn't throwing myself at anyone." And he pulled the car over so suddenly I gasped. He turned to look at me with this intense expression and said, I'm sorry, I just love you so much that the thought of anyone else making you smile drives me crazy. You're everything to me, Heather. The idea of losing you makes me insane." I told myself it was romantic. That jealousy was just passion in disguise. And I was lucky to have someone who cared that much. After that, the comments started coming more frequently. "You're not wearing that out, are you?" He'd say when I put on a dress I used to love. "That makeup makes you look cheap," he'd mention casually while I was getting ready. God, do you have to laugh like that? Everyone's staring at you. He'd say these things casually, almost like he was doing me a favor by pointing out my flaws, and I started changing myself piece by piece to avoid setting him off. Shorter hemlines became longer ones. Bold lipstick became neutral tones. I stopped laughing so loud, stopped talking so much, stopped being so much. My friends started asking why I never came out anymore, and I made excuses because the truth was, Conrad didn't like them. They're a bad influence, he said. They don't understand what we have. They're jealous of you, Heather. Can't you see that? They want to sabotage us. One by one, they stopped calling, and I told myself it was fine because I had Conrad, and he was all I needed. We got married after 2 years of dating. A beautiful ceremony that my parents paid for because Conrad said it was tradition. And who was I to argue with tradition? I walked down the aisle toward this man who I thought hung the moon, completely blind to the fact that I was walking into a cage. The first year of marriage was when the real Conrad started to emerge, like he'd been wearing a costume the whole time, and finally felt comfortable enough to take it off. The criticism that used to come occasionally became constant. This house is disgusting. What do you do all day? You call this dinner? My mother would never serve something this bland. Would it kill you to put some effort into your appearance? You used to try when we were dating. Nothing I did was right. He'd come home from work and I'd feel my whole body tense up, scanning his face to figure out what kind of night it was going to be. Good mood meant I could breathe. Bad mood meant I'd spend the next several hours trying to become invisible. The first time he hit me was over a casserole. I still remember exactly what it was. This chicken and rice dish I'd made 100 times before. Except this time I'd accidentally used the wrong kind of cheese. He took one bite, made a face, and said, "What the hell did you do to this?" I started apologizing immediately, the words tumbling out. "I'm sorry. I used the wrong cheese. I wasn't paying attention. I can make something else. It'll only take 20 minutes. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. 20 minutes? You want me to wait 20 more minutes because you can't follow a simple recipe? The back of his hand connected with my face before I even realized he'd moved. I stood there in my own kitchen with my cheek burning and my ears ringing, and he looked at me with this expression of pure disgust and said, "Look what you made me do. I didn't want to do that, Heather. You made me do that." Then he walked out, got in his car, and didn't come back until the next morning. When he did come back, he had flowers and tears in his eyes, and this whole speech prepared. "I've never done anything like that before," he said, his voice cracking. "Work has been so stressful, and I just snapped. It'll never happen again. Please forgive me. I love you so much. I hate myself for hurting you." I believed him because I needed to believe him, because the alternative was admitting that my whole life had become a lie. It happened again 2 weeks later, and then a week after that. And then it became so regular that I stopped counting, stopped being surprised, stopped feeling much of anything at all. I learned to read his moods like weather patterns, learned which topics to avoid, learned how to make myself so small and quiet that maybe he'd forget I was there. I flinched when he raised his hand, even if he was just reaching for something on a shelf. I apologized for everything, constantly, compulsively. Sorry for existing, sorry for breathing, sorry for being the kind of wife who apparently deserved to be hit over cheese. The woman I used to be, the one who laughed too loud and wore bold lipstick and had opinions about things. She disappeared so gradually that I didn't even notice she was gone, until there was nothing left but this hollow shell who jumped at shadows and counted bruises in the bathroom mirror. I tried to tell my mom once, about a year into the marriage. I'd shown up at her house with a black eye that I'd covered with makeup, except the makeup wasn't covering it well enough, and she noticed. "What happened to your face?" she asked, tilting my chin toward the light. For one desperate moment, I thought this was it. This was my chance. Someone was finally going to see the truth and help me. "Conrad hit me," I said, and the words came out so quiet I wasn't sure she'd heard them. But she had. I know she had because her face did this thing, this complicated series of expressions that ended somewhere between discomfort and disbelief. "What did you do?" she asked, and my heart cracked right down the middle. Not, "Are you okay?" or "We need to get you out of there," but, "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said, my voice breaking. "Mom, I didn't do anything. He just gets angry sometimes and I don't know what sets him off and I'm scared." She patted my hand like I was a child throwing a tantrum over nothing. "Marriage is hard, sweetheart. You have to learn to manage his moods. Men are sensitive creatures. They need to feel respected in their own homes." "Mom, he hit me," I said again, like maybe she hadn't understood the first time. She sighed. "Heather, every couple has rough patches. Your father and I certainly did. You need to learn when to hold your tongue and when to give him space. Conrad is a good man. He provides for you. He comes to family dinners. Whatever's happening at home, I'm sure you two can work through it if you just try harder." I left her house that day feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. My dad was even worse. I never told him directly, but he saw a bruise on my arm once at a family dinner, finger-shaped marks that I'd failed to cover with my sleeve, and when I caught him looking, I saw him make a choice. He glanced at Conrad laughing with my mom in the kitchen. looked back at the bruises on his daughter's arm, and said, "Pass the potatoes, please." He chose to look away. He chose to keep eating and talking about the game last Sunday, and pretending that his daughter wasn't sitting across from him wearing evidence of abuse like jewelry. That's the moment I knew I was on my own. That's the moment I stopped hoping anyone would save me. Conrad knew exactly how to play my parents. He'd show up to family dinners with wine and compliments, the perfect son-in-law, so charming and attentive that my mom would literally gush about how lucky I was. "You really hit the jackpot with this one, Heather," she'd say, and Conrad would smile and say, "I'm the lucky one, trust me." He'd put his arm around me and squeeze just a little too hard, a reminder that he was in control even here, and I'd smile and play along because what else could I do? One time my mom made a comment about how I'd lost weight, said I was looking too thin, and Conrad jumped in with, "I keep telling her to eat more, but she's so dedicated to staying fit for me." And they all laughed like it was adorable instead of recognizing it for what it was. He was starving me. He controlled what I ate, when I ate, how much I ate, said I was getting soft and no one wanted a fat wife. But my parents just saw a devoted husband who cared about his wife's health. The night I finally left, he'd thrown me into a wall hard enough to crack one of my ribs. I don't even remember what started it. Probably something stupid, something meaningless, because it was always something stupid and meaningless. I felt my rib break, felt this horrible grinding sensation in my chest, and something in me broke too. Not physically, but spiritually. This final snap of whatever thread had been keeping me tethered to the life I'd built with him. I waited until he passed out drunk on the couch, packed one bag with shaking hands, and walked out the front door at 3 a.m. with nowhere to go and nothing to my name. I drove to my parents' house because even after everything, even after my mom's dismissal and my dad's deliberate blindness, some stupid part of me still believed they would help me when it really mattered. I stood on their porch at 4 a.m. crying so hard I could barely breathe, my ribs screaming with every sob. My mom opened the door in her bathrobe, squinting at me in confusion. "Heather? What on earth? It's 4 a.m. She looked past me at the empty driveway. "Where's Conrad? Does he know you're here?" "I left him," I said through my tears. "Mom, he threw me into a wall tonight. I think my rib is broken. I need help. Please. I need somewhere to stay." She sighed, this heavy, disappointed sigh that I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. "Heather, you can't just leave your husband in the middle of the night over a fight." "It wasn't a fight," I sobbed. "He hurt me. He's been hurting me for years, and I finally had to go. Please, Mom, please just let me in." My father appeared behind her, took one look at me standing there crying and injured, and said, "What's all this noise?" My mom turned to him and said, "Heather left Conrad over some argument. She wants to stay here." I lifted my shirt to show them my side, showed them the bruise already forming over my broken rib. "Look," I begged. "Look what he did to me." My mother looked at it for a long moment, then back at my face and said, "You've always been dramatic. Conrad loves you. Whatever happened, I'm sure you two can talk through it." "Your mother's right," my dad said, already turning to go back to bed. "Go home to your husband. Work it out like adults." Then my mom stepped back and closed the door. They actually closed the door in my face and left me standing on the porch with a broken rib and a broken heart, and nowhere in the world to go. I heard the deadbolt click into place. I heard my father's footsteps going back up the stairs. And I stood there in the dark understanding for the first time that I had never had parents who loved me. I had parents who loved the idea of me, the version of me that did what she was told, and didn't cause problems, and stayed married to the man who brought good wine to Thanksgiving. The real me, the broken, bleeding me who needed them most. That person didn't exist to them at all. Now you understand why I can't let them back in. They chose Conrad over me when I had nothing. They watched me lose everything and sided with my abuser. And now they need me? I've been preparing for the day they'd come crawling back. I just didn't know it would feel this satisfying. The next conversation we have, because trust me, they're not stopping. I'm laying everything out. Every choice they made. Every way they failed me. They wanted to talk? Fine. We're going to talk. I'll let you know how it goes. I didn't have to wait long for that conversation. 3 days after the lobby incident, my mom showed up at my apartment again, but this time something was different. She wasn't alone. My dad was with her, and they weren't wearing those entitled expressions I'd gotten used to seeing. They looked smaller somehow, defeated in a way I'd never seen before, standing outside my building like two people who'd finally run out of plays. I almost walked past them like I had every other time, but then my mom said something that stopped me cold. "We know about Kate," she said, and her voice cracked on the name. "Conrad's new girlfriend. She found us." I turned around slowly because I had no idea what she was talking about. Kate was a name I'd heard maybe once or twice through the grapevine. Some woman Conrad had started dating about a year after our divorce, but I'd made it a point to know as little about his life as possible. "What does that have to do with anything?" I asked, and my dad cleared his throat in that way he does when he's about to say something that costs him. "She showed us things," he said, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "Pictures, medical records, text messages, things Conrad sent her when he was drunk, bragging about what he used to do to you. My mom was crying now. Not the theatrical sobs I'd grown up with, but quiet tears that streamed down her